Giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rahachwarash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations, as always, to the elect. News and prophecy, linking things that are happening worldwide, as well as here in Babylon the Great, linking these things to the Holy Scriptures, giving you faith and assurance, all right, that all of these things that are being done throughout the four corners of the earth are ordained, all right, and were prophesied before they happen, meaning the Heavenly Father is in control, all right, as the Scriptures say, all right, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, all right, so as we are witnessing this ongoing tension, as we'll get into in this lesson, between Babylon the Great, all right, and the beast, all right, which is the EU and even some NATO nations. We're witnessing tension, friction, which is going to lead to prophecy being fulfilled, as many of these European countries are going to disband from the agreement and confederacy that they had with Babylon the Great, all right, and be used as vessels, all right, to shoot missiles and help Russia finish the job which prophecy foretells. All right, so we're looking at America, right, and their relationship and support of the small hats as well is leading to tension throughout the four corners of the earth. All right, and they are now being called out. And as we'll get into, their look, Babylon's look is more stout than its fellows, and things are happening. All of these things are ordained of the Heavenly Father, as we just read or quoted. All right, Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of Yahweh. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whatsoever or whithersoever he will. Okay, let's get this in the NLT. The king's heart is like a string of water directed by the Lord. He guides it wherever he pleases. Okay, and currently here at the end of Esau's world, we know prophetically, right, that there will be tension between, okay, the EU nations, the beast, and the whore, Babylon the Great. All right, this is the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and 20. Okay, so the Lord is in control. That's one of the things you have to, add to your arsenal, is the faith and assurance that the Heavenly Father is the reason that all of these things are happening. Because once you lose that faith and you start to think man is in control, all right, you start to operate and think outside of what is written in the volume of the book. And there's going to be a lot pulling at us, all right, as we go down into this straight gate, all right, to attack our faith in that very, very assurance, man. Okay, so everything happening here on the planet Earth can be explained by biblical prophecy, including the victory over these very things. See? Daniel 7 and 20 says, "In the 10 horns," which speaks to the EU nations, all right, Europe, all right, "and of the other which came up," all right, which is Babylon the Great, "and before him whom 3 fell, the Spanish, the French, and the British," all right, the Revolutionary Wars led to the 13 colonies of the United States, which eventually became the 50 United States. "Even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things." Okay, and having eyes, going into the fact that he's a mere man, but he boasts, all right, in his wisdom. On the left-hand side, his AI, his sword, which AI has now been aligned with the sword. Okay, his false science, okay, which is pseudoscience, and all these various great things he boasts themselves in, which we've seen over the years. Miracles, all right, on the left-hand side are being performed right before your very eyes. A military that is just absolutely, astounding. Not only the military here in Babylon is amazing, right, the Navy, but then you have the, subordinate vassals, which are the EU nations and the NATO nations that have basically, formed this confederacy that has made them an unstoppable beast. But at the forefront of this confederacy is Babylon the Great. You see, and there's tension between, all right, Babylon the Great and the European, countries, because Babylon the Great is of the opinion that the reason you Europeans, have or are able to enjoy, the fatness of any of the blessing is because of what we did in conquering, this western part of the world. Okay, and then the EU, all right, or European countries are saying, well, we funded it. Okay, and there's this constant back and forth. They don't agree economically. And as we're going to show you in this video, but as you can see here, America is that horn, all right, that's spoken of earlier in this chapter, which is Babylon the Great, which through that horn, that little horn, the end would come. Okay, and we're in the time of that little horn. Okay. So as you keep reading, it says, even of that horn, Daniel 7:20, even of that horn, Babylon the Great, that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Okay. And I beheld the same horn, Babylon the Great, make war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given unto the saints of the Most High. So this is just about where we are. We're in between, the horn making war with the saints, conquering the world. Okay, along, with, the EU support, the NATO support. They have just dominated the whole entire planet Earth. But as you can see here amongst this confederacy, America has a mouth that speaks great things, and his look is more stout than his fellows. All right, when we look up this term stout, all right, it's going to make sense as we get into these videos, and we always go into it, but all right, we're going to continuously go into it until the Heavenly Father brings the said prophecy all the way to pass, which is when all of these European nations flip, okay, and join with Russia, all right, against the small hat and against Babylon, man. And this is where it's all heading. Rabbah, great, okay, more stout. As you can see here, master. America is master, okay, over this whole confederacy between these Edomites, all right? And they're aligned with Israel, the small hat. They pretty much, those two go hand in hand, all right? Both being babies of the British Empire, all right? But America, all right, which is pretty much owned by Amalek, has become master. They've become great. They've become captain. They've become chief, all right? They've become stout, okay, among these this European coalition that they have, all right? And we'll look up the word stout, all right? A person of a heavy build, all right? Strong and thick, all right? Fattish, which fat in, the ancient world meant that you're rich, or you look healthy. Fatter in flesh, that can mean healthy, that can mean, rich on top. It didn't always mean to be, have a big belly. Plump, all right? Pot belly, all right? Eventually it became to mean that, but in ancient times it can mean, well covered, all right? So it can deal with your build, but it can also deal with your mindset, all right? Strong. So America, all right, has a look, all right, that is more stout than its fellows, okay? Whose look, when you look up the word look, appearance, chazawan, appearance, vision, okay? So as we look at this particular article and we get into these videos, as you can see here, Trump says a decaying Europe is being led by weak people, all right? Donald Trump has described Western Europe, all right, which pretty much when you look at the map of the EU, it's nothing but the Western Roman Empire all over again. They've just now added, all right, Babylon the Great, okay, to make it a power worldwide, you see? And then you have Canada as well. All right. And we'll look at a map later if the spirit allows. But Donald Trump has described Western Europe as a group of decaying nations being led by weak leaders. All right. In this particular interview, which we'll show you. All right, let's listen to him. Okay. This is off of Politico or Politico. It's called Donald Trump, the conversation. Let's listen to his mindset surrounding Europe. All right, as we just read, his look would be more stout than his fellows, and we'll also get into Daniel, the second chapter, where it foretells you of this very, very divide that we're witnessing, which is key to our salvation. This is why we keep our eyes on this.
I mean, look, then they should support it. Europe I'm friendly with all of them. I mean, I like all of them. I have no real enemy. I've had a couple that I didn't like over the years. I actually like the current crew. I like them a lot. But and I know them very well. I know them really well. Some are friends, some are okay. I know the good leaders. I know the bad leaders. I know the smart ones. I know the stupid ones. You get some.
See that? This is stoutness. This is his look being more stout than his European fellows in this confederacy, all right, or alliance or allegiance that they have in these latter days. So the Lord is dividing these devils from the inside out. He's saying some of them are all right, some of them are cool, some are stupid. Listen to him.
Europe I'm friendly with all of them. I mean, I like all of them. I have no real enemy. I've had a couple that I didn't like over the years. I actually like the current crew. I like them a lot. But and I know them very well. I know them really well. Some are friends, some are okay. I know the good leaders. I know the bad leaders. I know the smart ones. I know the stupid ones. You get some real stupid ones too. But they're not doing a good job. Europe is not doing a good job in many ways. They're not doing a good job.
I want to ask
you
about that.
They talk too much.
They're not doing a good job. They talk too much. Okay?
And they're not producing. We're talking about Ukraine. They talk, but they don't produce. And the war just keeps going on and on. I mean, 4 years now it's been going on, long before I got here. This is not my war. This is Joe Biden's war. And in terms of America, it's a very sad thing. And the only reason I really care about it is because I hate to see young, beautiful people being killed. That's largely why I got involved. I mean, if you look at the Congo and Rwanda, that's been going on. 14 million people at least killed. Nobody has any idea how many, but killed. Machetes, a lot of machete killings, vicious. But if you look at the wars and some of the wars that really we're going to be millions and millions of people. The Prime Minister of Pakistan said, I saved millions of people by getting involved with stopping India and Pakistan from fighting.
I do want to go back to Europe for a moment, though, because you said they're not doing a lot of things right in your view. And just
they can't be doing right because look what's happened.
Well, your administration just released a new national security strategy that sent shockwaves throughout Europe. The strategy says a key pillar of American foreign policy should be, quote, cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations. How much should European leaders prepare for your administration to push to reshape the continent's politics?
Well, Europe is a different place.
What do you mean by
that? And
if
it keeps going the way it's going, Europe will not be, in my opinion, many of those countries will not be viable countries any longer. Their immigration policy is a disaster. What they're doing with immigration is a disaster. We had a disaster coming, but I was able to stop it. We have no people coming through our borders now, 0, 7 months. I mean, who would believe 0? We went from millions of people, in some cases, millions of people a month, but millions of people to no people.
That's not what Europe looks like.
The opposite, yeah. I know Europe, they're coming in from all parts of the world, not just the Middle East. They're coming in from the Congo, tremendous numbers of people coming from the Congo.
And as we did a video on the reason you have mass, immigration or migrants coming to Europe or to America from these countries because they've dominated these countries, stolen their resources. So people are going to, look to go elsewhere where they can find work or, live some sort of decent life. All right. Let's not leave that out. All right. And see, we're living in a time where Esau Edom is trying to free himself of any form of guilt. All right. And play the blame game All right. But all of his crimes are being addressed through the Holy Spirit, man. You see? Because that's a big part of their end game is, pointing out how immigration is ruining, these European countries in America. Well, why is there so much immigration? If you allow these people to, even if you rule over them, if you allow them to benefit from the resources in their land. But again, this devil can never have enough. Okay. As a matter of fact, let's get that in Habakkuk. Okay. Because you can see this devil is talking greasy. Habakkuk chapter 2 and 5. Yea, also because he transgresses by wine. His way of operating, his philosophy, his very being is in league with the spiritual demon Satan. So nothing good will ever come from his policies. Nothing good will ever come from anything. Even when it seems like, all right, it's a decent policy, there's some undermining evil or wickedness in it. He's just not right. He is a proud man. The pride of thine heart have deceived thee. Neither keepeth at home. He's all over the world, right? Waging war. Okay. And all of you devils are guilty of war crimes, because we could talk about Babylon and the small hat and their war crimes worldwide, their international policy. All right. And how they break all kind of rules and the UN never does anything. All right, but how are they able to do a lot of that wickedness? All right, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria. How are they able to do a lot of this wickedness? The EU and NATO nations backing them. But see, we're living at a time where all of these agreements are being uprooted because of prophecy, and an evil eye is being turned towards Babylon the Great as well as the small hat amongst this Edomite, all right, power structure that has dominated the earth since the Renaissance, you see? And even within that, from the Renaissance on, there have been wars that they had with each other. But after World War II, pretty much they supposedly established some form of peace with the European Union. Before that, the EEU and, the Treaty of Rome and all of these various different things but now it's not working. It's not working, man. So he keepeth at home. He's all over the world, dominating, stealing resources, plundering, okay, ethnically cleansing, right? Who enlargeth his desires as hell. Okay? It comes to a point where it's like, okay, what more do you want? Okay? Well, destruction, death. His pride, his greed is going to lead to death. And as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth in that which is not his? So the reason you got mass immigration, let's not take away from colonization and its role and factor in why people have to leave their countries or their homelands to try to live, to seek and live a decent life, because of all of the theft of you devils, man. Okay, just wanted to point that out.
And even worse, they're coming from prisons of the Congo and many other countries. And for some reason, they want to be politically correct, which actually I think is the opposite of politically correct. But they want to be politically correct, and they don't want to send them back to where they came from. And Europe is, if you take a look at Paris, it's a much different place. I loved Paris. It's a much different place than it was. If you take a look at London, you have a mayor named Khan. He's a horrible mayor. He's an incompetent mayor, but he's a horrible, vicious, disgusting mayor. I think he's done a terrible job. London's a different place. I love London. I love London. And I hate to see it happen. My roots are in Europe, as you know.
Right.
And I hate to see that happen. This is one of the great places in the world, and they're allowing people just to come in and unchecked, unvetted.
So how involved are you going to get? I mean, could we see you getting involved in European
I want to run the United States. I don't want to run Europe. I'm involved in Europe very much.
Might you endorse
NATO
candidates?
calls me daddy. I mean, I have a lot to say about it. Look,
NATO calls me daddy.
The GDP from 2% to 5%. The 2% they weren't paying and the 5% they are paying. And they're paying it because when we send things over, NATO pays for it, and I assume they give it to Ukraine. But Europe is being destroyed.
Would you consider getting involved in some of those elections to put in leaders that you think are better suited?
Well, I've endorsed people, but I've endorsed people that a lot of Europeans don't like. I've endorsed Viktor Orban.
All right. So there you go. I mean, you can watch the rest of this. I mean, you see where it's going. Okay. So this is the mindset. Now I wanted to play, I'll get this out of here. I wanted to play some of this video here as well. All right. Scott Ritter. Now remember, they rolled on this guy. All right. Because he was coming up, you know, he's an ex-Marine. All right. Who has a lot of intel and insight. And there was a point where he was going so hard against Babylon that they rolled on him. So in a lot of his interviews now, he's kind of changing his tune. You know, well, he'll get on Babylon, but you know, you could tell. All right, his tone has been shifted. As a matter of fact, let me see. Scott Ritter. All right, rated. He was rated. Okay. And so supposedly he was involved in a child sex sting operation. All right, but he has some intel. But they raided his home in August of 2024, right? Seized his passport as he was trying to go to Russia, but he has some decent insight. Let's listen to his video here, this video here off of Glenn Deason. Scott Ritter, the U.S. now considers the EU an enemy. Okay? Now, before we do that, let's get Daniel 2:40, right? In the fourth kingdom, Rome, right? The revival of Rome and the revival of Rome, right? Because prophetically, the revival of Rome would be the end of Esau's world and the beginning of the kingdom. So you have to ask yourself, where are we prophetically? These are the things that camps are trying to run away from by, you know, diverting your attention away. No, we're at the end of Esau's world. All right? Because the final, all right, stronghold of any heathen nation would be through that little horn that we were talking about, which is Babylon the Great, which is the revival of Rome. After that, all right, the Heavenly Father sets a decision. He sets a judgment and sends his son back. See? This is the book of Daniel 2:40. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, it shall break in pieces and bruises. And this was what Rome was able to do. Okay? As a matter of fact, let's get this same thing is talked about in 2nd Esdras, the 11th chapter. Okay? In the 40th verse, and the fourth overcame all. As a matter of fact, let's start at 39. Art thou that remainest of the four beasts who have made to reign in my world, that the end of their times might come through them? Okay, so the four beasts, you go to Daniel the 7th chapter, right? After those beasts ruled, the Lord would end everything and set up the kingdom of heaven. See, but then you had the fourth beast, which was Rome, right? And what did Rome do? And the fourth came, right? And overcame all the beasts that were past and had power over the whole world with much fearfulness and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. And so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. For the earth hast thou not judged with truth. See? So Rome did that, but then Rome will be revived in the latter days. Then the end will come. And we're living in that right now. For thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, thou hast destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit. See? And has cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. And then when they try to, you know, leave their country because of the oppression and come amongst you and your stronghold, you get mad. the Edomite, man. Therefore is thy wrongful dealing come up to the highest, and thy pride unto the mighty. So this is where we are now. Okay? Daniel 2:40, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, for as much iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and subdue and bruise. Whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, all right, because he's looking at a statue. This is a statue, a vision that Nebuchadnezzar received that's being broken down by Daniel, all right, who had the ability through the Holy Spirit to foresee future events, to break down dreams. And see, we're here in these latter days to expound upon these very visions and things that were broken down back then. So whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, which are the end of this big statue. Okay, as a matter of fact, let's type in a picture. Let's just look up a picture. Picture of Daniel 2 statue. That's off Facebook. I don't have a Facebook. Let's see. This one. The fuck? Let's do it like, okay. I'll just move it over. But you had the head of gold, Babylon, the silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, bronze, the Greeks, the legs of iron, Rome, the feet of clay. They even know that it's the modern day Europe. Okay? Which ultimately Europe are subordinate and vassals to America, which that's leading to a lot of issues here in these latter days, whereas you have European countries saying, look, we don't want to be overly dependent on Babylon. All right, we're not your child, nigga. We made you. You didn't make us. Yada, yada, yada. All right, and the list goes on of the different divisions, which we'll get into some of those divisions. All right, so the toes, the feet and toes represents the end of the statue, which is, all right, the European Union, NATO, and it's all headed by Babylon the Great. Okay? But the Lord is dividing that sword, whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part potter's clay and part iron. All right? For the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron. They have the strength of the sword, right? For as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, right? You take a iron, a piece of iron or steel, and you put a clay on it, they're not going to bind together. Okay? The clay is eventually going to fall off. They're not going to bind together, meaning that they would be divided. So they agree, all right, on a lot of things, but they disagree on more. You see what I'm saying? And this is prophecy, all right, pursuant to the book of Obadiah. We'll get that, but let's listen to Scott Ritter.
Well, I'm thinking if you switch from you recognize that the world has switched from unipolarity to multipolarity and you have to prioritize places, it does make a lot of sense. That is, first priority is, well, shore up your own hemisphere, that is the Western hemisphere. Then, of course, confront the main adversary, which is in Asia, China primarily. And if you pivot to those places, you pivot away. So that's Europe, which is getting the short end of the stick. So a lot of this makes sense. But there's a lot of focus on ideology as well, though. How do you make sense of this? Or they call for reducing the role of ideology, to be more specific?
You know, when you take a look at, again, evaluating the Trump administration over time, go back to the last national security strategy document that was promulgated by the Biden administration. In it, they build a world vision that is predicated on the defense of the rules-based international order. That was the sacred mantra of everything American. And from that came the defense of democracy, American democracy imposed on other nations as the gold standard. Donald Trump gave a number of very telling speeches during his campaign in which he rejected the rules-based international order, and he rejected the notion that America has a right to dictate things, outcomes to other nations based upon, American principles, values, etc. He said the place for American values is at home. That's where we need to defend them, at home. And if we shouldn't be projecting them out of our shores if we haven't fully defended them at home, that's a little bit hypocritical. Remember one of the answers about to a question he gave, Putin is a killer. He said, well, we've killed a lot of people too. Very pragmatic, realistic answer. I would say that it shouldn't take anybody by surprise that Trump, when evaluating the world we live in, is more interested in the practicalities, economic relations, who we invest our money in, why are we investing money to places. And, there's a difference between telling people what you have to do, which Trump says that's not our role, and giving people money. Trump's like, I'm going to give you money if you align with us, if you're on our side, if you're doing what we want, if you do what we believe in, then you can get money. When it comes to Europe right now, let's just look at, again, a simplistic analogy, but we'll use it nonetheless, or a simplistic, mechanism of explanation. NATO claims to be all about America. My God, the Secretary General of NATO can't, he just falls over himself to praise America and the role that America plays, the leadership role, especially when we tell NATO how much money they have to spend. That we must spend this money because Daddy told us to. Okay, that's one way. Now, then there's the European Union, which is as anti-American as the day is long. Let's just be honest about it. I can dig through all European Union statements. They are anti-American. They're fundamentally anti-American. And it's not just the fact that they're posturing themselves as a global competitor to the United States. They don't like us.
See that? They no longer, want to be looked at as, the vassal or, subordinate or dependent upon America. All right. But this is the beginning, all right, stages, which is going to happen fast, of this confederacy being broken.
They simply don't like us. They belittle us. I read their stuff. I'm not, this to be true. Go into the web pages of any one of these European parliamentarians that fly the blue flag and the gold stars and posture themselves as to be the moral equivalent or superior of the United States of America. They hate the United States of America and they despise Americans.
Yep. They look at you as stupid. All right. They look at you as, airheaded, uninformed. It's a big, strong divide between the EU and the American. Okay. And this goes on to the level of politics as well. Okay. But see, they've given their kingdom to the beast because it came with goodies. It came with, certain, benefits. But we're living at a time where the Lord is getting ready to wrap this place up, pack it up. All right.
We're only useful when we do what they want us to do, but they don't like it. Look, some of the times they don't like us for cause. America's a war power, a warmongering nation. Yep, guilty as charged. But then don't pretend to be our friend when you put on your NATO hat. Because the same people that condemn us when they wear their EU hat are the same people that are embracing us when they wear their NATO hat. This is a fundamental inconsistency that the Trump administration's fed up with. And the other thing is when we sit down with Europe and try and say, who do we want to align ourselves with? We don't want to align ourselves with people who, denigrate us. If you don't like America, guess what? We don't like you either. So we shall go our own ways. But the other thing is, if you act in a way that is against core American values, then don't expect us to embrace you either. And freedom of speech is a core American value. And it certainly isn't being practiced in Europe today in many locations.
And this is why you have this friction as well. All right. As you can see here, Elon Musk says the EU must be abolished. All right. As they're going back and forth over, censorship, X was fined by the EU because of these new laws they put in place. They're saying, Musk is allowing certain rhetoric to be, posted online because, there's this big movement on X, of, people, they want people saying things. They want all kind of, confusion. They want division, but the EU just passed these laws, which we'll tap into that. But look at that. Elon Musk says the EU must be abolished. All right. He's called for the EU to be abolished and sovereignty returned to individual countries. Okay? So there's a lot happening, which we'll tap a little bit into this. Okay, but as a matter of fact, I have a video on that. Let's just finish this up and we'll go into that.
Interference in elections. I mean, you guys, Europeans, wake up. This is Donald Trump. Okay, he believes fervently that the election was stolen from him in 2020. He knows, and this is an absolute, that the Democrats sought to undermine his 2016 candidacy. All right, so now you're running around playing stupid games in Romania, Moldova. You're seeking to outlaw a political party in Germany, and you want the United States, you want this president to be silent? No, you're anti-American by definition. And this is a national security strategy of the United States that seeks to promote American security interests. So don't be surprised that we've turned against Europe. And
don't be surprised if we turned against Europe. Okay?
This is a fundamental turn. This isn't, you know, a little lover's spat. This isn't a quarrel that will be papered over. This is of a fundamental nature. Europe is on a pathway, according to the Trump administration, to civilizational erasure. That means you're gone. You're doing it to yourself. We have decided that we will try to get those European nations, not the European Union, not the European community, those European nations that are worth saving on the right trajectory. But NATO is finished. I hope people understand that too, because the Trump administration has said there are members of NATO today who don't reflect the cultural values and realities of the nations that signed the charter. And
yep, Turkey.
Therefore, they are incompatible with what we believe should be defended under the charter. It's over, finished, done, goodbye.
All right, now I want to jump to this part, and then we'll switch to another video.
How you see the possible drop-offs among the European states? That is, you mentioned that the EU, either the EU or Europe, is now considered to be an enemy, and it doesn't seem that it doesn't seem like an exaggeration, really. Again, I would encourage people to actually read this document, where the European leaders are referred to as being authoritarian, undemocratic, essentially crushing political opposition, media, and dissent. So it does, and also when you add the aspect of seeking to cultivate opposition to reverse all of this, it does come off as that this is now not just a drifting apart, but an actual possible confrontation. But Europe, no matter how much we talk about Europe as an entity, it's the EU itself has 27 member states, and for some, like Hungary, they're under great pressure and being punished often by the EU, by the Germans. So there's going to be some drop-offs. You mentioned Poland, of course, that they have for good reasons. They want to have America. Well, they will favor America over, for example, the Germans. But how do you see this conflict between the EU and the United States? How would this...
And to tap into that real quick, some of the stuff he's going into.
From Washington.
You can see here, big crisis in European Union. Italy, Hungary, and Poland, and Austria drifting away. The end of the EU. Okay, so this speaks to everything that prophecy said. All right, Daniel 2, all right, and 41, whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, all right, part of potter's clay and part iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So they agree on certain things, but they disagree. And some of the main disagreements that we can just summarize here, all right, between the EU and America, and NATO's up in there as well, is trade conflict, all right, digital regulation fight, okay, as we'll tap into that. Foreign policy rifts. You know, America just came with this peace plan for Ukraine, and the European nations are like, wait a minute. Okay, so these are the main three, but there's a lot more. So they don't agree economically. You see what I'm saying? So it's partly broken. Taken together, these issues reflect not just isolated policy disagreements, but a deeper shift in transatlantic relations, from cooperative alliance towards more transactional, contentious relationships over economics, texts, and geopolitics. You see? And the book of Obadiah says what? Obadiah 1 and 7, or Obadiah verse 7, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. All right. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid the wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Okay. So we're witnessing, okay, an abolishment of this confederacy. All right. Your allies will turn against you. Okay. The men that allied with you shall send you away to the border and set your ass up to be destroyed. The men you were at peace with will deceive you and overpower you. So as these different countries are, drifting away from the alliance that benefited Babylon the Great, all right, as we're going to get that in Revelation 17, what's going to happen? All right. Russia is going to step up in there and save a lot of these countries, and they're going to align themselves against the West, against the small hat. This is what's being formulated through the Holy Spirit. But let's keep listening to this guy for a little bit more.
Affect the cohesion, you think, of Europe? Because it's not as if all of the European countries are going to stand up and let's, de-invest from America. We'll stand together. We seem to be able to unite around a common hatred of Russia, but even there we seem to break up a little bit with the Fico, Orban, going their own way. But to unite somehow against America, which the former EU foreign policy chief suggested, it doesn't seem likely.
No, again, if Europe tries to do this, it's the end of Europe. Because, as you said, there will not be consensus. Nations will peel away. There will be different points of view, and the United States will exploit all of these. And we will exploit it to the detriment of Europe. But what will happen is Europe will fracture among a number of fault lines, and the United States will be in the business of picking friends and picking enemies. And, it depends on which side of the fence you decide you want to be on. But I can guarantee you this outcome, that if you choose to go against America, you do so at your own detriment. There's not a single European nation that will confront the United States decisively and emerge victorious. The government that does that will not exist. We are very...
How about if they align with Russia and China?
good at regime change. It's what we do. And if you don't think we can target European countries, then you don't know anything about our history in Europe. Ask the French.
So he's basically saying, look, we'll go and take over your shit and do what we always do. We'll set up leaders that will bend the knee to our agenda. We'll set up leaders in your countries that will be more pro-America. You try to come up against America, we're going to kick your ass. And now he has a different tune, because a year ago, he was speaking big shit against America. See? But he got raided. So he's kind of switched his tune, and he's being a little bit more balanced and more pro-America. But we know what the prophecy says. It ain't going to end well for Babylon the Great, man.
French, ask the Italians, ask the Germans, ask anybody. The history of American covert and overt interference in the democratic processes of Europe is a long and storied one. And
stout. His look is more stout than his fellows.
We will be more than happy. Every one of your capital cities has an American embassy in it, and you've allowed the United States to build up very large CIA stations in these respective embassies. What do you think they're there to do? To hold hands and sing Kumbaya? To be your friends? No, they are there to implement the policy directives given to them by the President of the United States. And one of the main things they do is political action. And they will actively be undermining any government that dares vocalize opposition to Donald Trump and the government of the United States. So it's over. You picked the wrong enemy. We're not an outsider that doesn't know anything about you. We built you. We created you. We clothed you. We fed you. We taught you how to crawl, taught you how to walk, taught you how to run, taught you how to talk.
That's a look more stout than his fellow. This is the American mindset towards Europe. We built you. It's through us coming over here and conquering and destroying that you were able to benefit and partake in the fatness, right?
There's not an aspect of European society that we aren't intimately familiar with and don't intimately control, either directly or indirectly. You picked the wrong enemy. You have zero ability to influence the United States. We have maximum opportunity to influence Europe. This is not a fight you want to fight, but if you do want to fight it, the outcome will be guaranteed. You will lose, and losing will not be pretty. because we will collapse you. We will collapse you politically. And if you want to play the harder game, we'll collapse you economically. We will be the ruin of Europe if that's the game Europe wants to play.
Yeah, remember I had a talk with.
All right, so you can watch the rest of that video. Let's check out this one.
Now, Rasmus Jarlov is a conservative member of Denmark's parliament and chair of its defense committee. Thanks so much for joining.
Hello, Jim. Thank you.
So first, I'd like your reaction to seeing Denmark, a NATO treaty ally, looking across the Atlantic at the U.S. and seeing a potential threat.
We participated in all the major U.S.-led wars in Korea, in the Gulf, and many other places in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. So it's not great that now we're receiving threats regarding Greenland, which is the main concern from a Danish point of view.
Well, you've only gone and done it, Donald. The United States of America, long seen as the world's defender of freedom, is now being called a military threat by its own allies under Donald Trump's leadership, to the point that one of the United States' closest allies has now stopped sharing intelligence because of the way that the U.S. is handling foreign policy.
And it's questionable at best. One of our biggest allies, the United Kingdom, recently stopped sharing intelligence with us in the Caribbean because they question whether this is legal or not. We've been asking for more briefings from the right people. We have not received them, but the information that you just shared with me is the public information. I don't have much more beyond that.
Well,
So yeah, some of these beast system allies of they're allies with America are questioning some of the moves that they're making. All right, blowing up ships, seizing oil. They're like, wait a minute, is this legal? And these are the things that America and the small hats have just been able to get away with worldwide, because everything is vetoed by in the UN. Because there's particular, laws and things that they're supposed to abide by that they just don't do. They don't abide by. Even within this confederacy, there's laws, but they continuously break them. See? So now world leaders are saying America is a security threat. EU and NATO, all right, allies are saying America is a security threat.
And the French government has said it's a violation of international law and the law of the sea. That's what our allies are saying about those strikes that are happening there.
Now let's talk about this. The U.S.'s closest allies, countries that have fought wars side by side, traded secrets, shared intelligence with since World War II, are now openly questioning whether the United States is the threat, not the protector. Earlier this week, the Danish Defense Intelligence Service, Denmark's top spy agency, dropped a bombshell. In its annual security report, they didn't just list Russia and China as threats. They said the United States itself is now seen as using its military and economic power in ways that create security concerns for other nations, most notably including U.S. allies.
We have some news right now. Denmark officially says the United States is a national security risk, the first ally of the United States to classify us as a national security risk to them. This report was released by the Danish Intelligence Service and said that the world's great powers are, quote, increasingly prioritizing their own interests and use force to achieve their goals. And the report, for the first time, named the United States as because of, quote, uncertainty about the role of the United States as a guarantor of European security. The United States uses economic power, including in the form of threats of high tariffs, to enforce its will and no longer excludes the use of military force, even against allies. And now the United States is officially classified as a security threat to Denmark. Remember, there's been the whole back and forth over Greenland and Greenland's future. No one's really talking about that anymore. But this is a pretty significant development.
So even with the Greenland thing, all right, could watch a little bit of this. Arctic showdown. Trump's Greenland envoy Landry triggers EU fury. Ursula warns border not for sale. So Trump wants control of Greenland, right? And that goes against interest of the EU.
New geopolitical storm is erupting in the Arctic, and it's putting the United States on a collision course with Europe. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has issued a blunt warning after U.S. President Donald Trump intensified his push to annex Greenland. Standing firmly beside Denmark and Greenland, von der Leyen declared the European Union's full solidarity, stressing that territorial integrity and sovereignty are non-negotiable pillars of international law. Her message was clear: borders cannot be redrawn by force or ambition. The flashpoint came after Trump announced the appointment of a special envoy to Greenland. a move almost unheard of in international diplomacy. The envoy, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, made the mission explicit, publicly stating his goal was to make Greenland a part of the U.S. The reaction in Denmark was swift and furious. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said he was deeply upset, calling the appointment and Landry's statements completely unacceptable. Denmark announced it would summon the U.S. ambassador to formally convey its anger, a rare...
Let's go back here. What did that just say? Hold up. EU chief warns sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable. Okay. Was another one I was just looking at. Let's see, Alan said something about ally. There we go. Greenland and Wh0re signals deepening rift between Washington and European allies. Okay. Obadiah, verse 7. All right. In the NLT, your allies will turn against you. This is what we're witnessing. Okay.
Was deeply upset, calling the appointment and Landry's statements completely unacceptable. Denmark announced it would summon the U.S. ambassador to formally convey its anger, a rare step between NATO allies. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas reinforced the warning, saying Greenland's status is for Greenlanders and Danes alone to decide, and that all partners must respect sovereignty under the United Nations Charter and NATO treaty obligations. But Trump has not backed down. On social media, he praised Landry's appointment, saying Greenland is essential to U.S. national security and global stability. Trump has repeatedly argued that America must control the vast, resource-rich Arctic island, even threatening military action if Denmark refuses. Greenland and Denmark have both issued firm rejections. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen and Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen released a joint statement declaring, "You cannot annex another country, not even with arguments about international security." Nielsen was even more direct. Greenland belongs to its people, and its future will be decided by them alone. This is not the first time such tensions have flared. Earlier this year, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance visited Greenland, claiming the island was vulnerable and that Washington had no other option but to expand its presence.
Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. You have underinvested in the people of Greenland, and you have underinvested in the security architecture of this incredible, beautiful landmass filled with incredible people. That has to change.
Last summer, Denmark summoned the envoy after reports of American influence operations targeting Greenland's population.
Yes, but Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders, and Greenland is part of the Danish kingdom, and that's not going to change. I think that many Greenlandic politicians are now gradually, both before the election campaign, during the election campaign, and even now making it very, very, very clear that Greenland wants to be Greenland, and we fully support that.
Now, the stakes are higher. Trump has also spoken openly about annexing the Panama Canal, the Gaza Strip, and even Canada.
So this Habakkuk 2:5, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell and is as death and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. We're witnessing it. But it's causing friction, even amongst other devils. They're like, enough, you dudes are doing too much.
Signaling a dramatic shift in American rhetoric toward territorial expansion. For Europe, this is no longer just about Greenland. It is about sovereignty, alliances, and whether international rules still apply when power is tested. As Brussels closes ranks behind Denmark and Greenland, a chilling question looms over the Arctic. Is this diplomatic brinksmanship or the opening move in a far larger global confrontation?
You assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this. We need them for economic security. The Panama...
They need those resources for the NWO. Okay?
Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something.
You might have to do something. So war is on the horizon, man, between these EU and NATO nations with them. There's going to be a royal rumble. Okay, America stay out of Greenland. She isn't picking a fight with him. The criminal is picking the fight. We Americans do not approve of this new idea. We should be making friends around the world, not enemies. Stop this nonsense, Trump. America, wasn't that something to boast about 300 years ago? Followed by genocide and making fortunes by slavery, presently ruled by a dictator who made his people the laughingstock of the world? I'm Canadian. I'm more happy than happy to fight the criminal USA with Denmark. The US has to have Greenland, while Russia has to have Ukraine, and China has to have Taiwan. Trump is doing this to distract you from the Epstein files, yada, yada, yada. All right, but we see where it's going. And then you see this situation here where Italy, Hungary, and Poland are drifting away from the EU. So I asked here in Austria, why is Italy, Hungary, and Poland and Austria in talks to leave the EU? Okay. Hungary, strong criticism of the EU. Poland, some public Euroscepticism, but not an exit plan. Italy's political tension with the EU. So there's just friction. Okay, there's just friction. It says the bottom line, none of these countries are legitimately in formal talks to leave the EU, but it's basically the divide is weakening the alliance. Okay? So when it says they're drifting away in the end of the EU, basically the alliance is being weakened. Okay? Because pursuant to the book of Revelation 17, right? And you can look more into exactly what's going on with those countries. But all we need is the division, just to show you that Revelation 17 and 12, and the 10 horns, the EU, which thou sawest, are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as of yet, but shall receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast, the Treaty of Rome, all right? The European Union, all of these various different things, which we have a breakdown on this whole chapter. If you want that, you can look it up or ask. Revelation 17 and 13, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So they made an alliance with this beast system, which has benefited Babylon the Great in many ways. But we're living in times where a lot of these countries are like, we no longer want to give our full power to this beast system. We need to be more independent and less reliant on Babylon. Okay, we don't agree economically. We don't agree technology wise. We don't agree with free speech. And all of these various different things that America stands for. It's just a big ball of division. Okay, so they've given their power to the beast, which benefited Babylon, but eventually, all right, these shall make war with the Lamb. So all of these Edomites are going to eventually make war with the Lamb, but he's going to destroy them, all right? But the point here in Revelation 17 and 16, in the 10 horns, the EU, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, America, Babylon, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and shall burn her with fire. For God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and that they're going to align with Russia to do that, and to agree to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the Most High be fulfilled. And his words are being fulfilled. Okay? So Daniel 2 and 42, and the toes of the feet, the 10 toes, are part iron and part clay, so shall the kingdom be partly strong and partly broken. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men through different agreements. All right, even early Europe, all right, they use marriages as forms of, binding their control and different, alliances. All right, they went amongst these nations, set up puppet governments, and everything was done for the benefit of forwarding this, concept of Babylon. But now it's not working anymore. But they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And this is going to lead to the kingdom coming. So they're not cleaving one to another. All right, is basically the point of me showing you these videos. Okay? As a matter of fact,
The Trump administration is taking its attacks on Europe from words into action. On Tuesday, the U.S. government announced visa bans on 5 Europeans who it accused of working to suppress American accounts on social media. The most prominent person targeted is former EU Commissioner Thierry Breton, considered a key architect of the Digital Services Act, or DSA, by the State Department. The landmark European legislation is meant to combat hate speech and disinformation online, but Washington argues it restricts free speech.
For far too long, ideologues in Europe have led organized efforts to coerce American platforms to punish American viewpoints they oppose. The Trump administration will no longer tolerate these egregious acts of extraterritorial censorship.
The DSA has become a frequent target of U.S. conservatives who see it as a weapon of censorship against right-wing thought in Europe and beyond, an accusation the EU furiously denies. Breton compared the visa bans to American political repression in the late 40s and 50s under Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Is McCarthy's witch hand back? As a reminder, 19% of the European Parliament, our democratically elected body, and all 27 member states unanimously voted the DSA. To our American friends, censorship isn't where you think it is.
The 5 Europeans targeted were identified by Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy Sarah Rogers on X. Aside from Breton, they include higher-ups at organizations working to counter digital hate and disinformation. Along with the DSA, the U.S. has gone after the UK's equivalent Online Safety Act. Last week, Washington suspended a tech cooperation deal with Britain, citing opposition to the country's online regulations.
So there you go. There's just more divide. And this is why
It's time now for Truth or Fake. Vedika Bahel joins me on.
Elon Musk is talking about, he's clashing with Europe.
On set. Hi, Vedika.
Hi, Karis.
Vedika, European digital transparency rules have become a flashpoint between Brussels and US big tech companies backed by Donald Trump's administration. Today, the European Commission has completely dismissed what it called completely crazy statements by Elon Musk. What did he say?
Well, yes, that is correct, Karis. X's Elon Musk has posted a slew of online attacks against the EU after the European Commission imposed a €120 million fine on X for breaching its transparency obligations. Now, in what I can only describe to you as a online frenzy, Musk posted and reposted a series of memes and jabs and satire. We can see a couple of examples of that here about his anger against the EU's decision. But he did take this as far as to compare the European Union to Nazi Germany. Now, he also made posts calling to dissolve the European Union entirely. He said here that the EU should be abolished and sovereignty returned to individual countries so governments can better represent their people. He followed this up by saying, I love Europe, but not the bureaucratic monster that is the EU. Now, this constant posting and these constant jabs, I'm talking hundreds of tweets here, well, this led to a response from the bloc itself, which said it's part of freedom of speech to put out even completely crazy statements. So the bloc hasn't minced its words there, Karis, about how it sees Elon Musk's behaviour.
And Vedika, what is the reason for this €120 million fine against Musk's platform?
Well, according to the European Commission on Friday, it is for non-compliance with the bloc's transparency rules. Now, as a very large platform, X has obligations under the DSA, that is the European Union's Digital Service Act. It is the bloc's flagship law in order to regulate online platforms. Now, the EU said that X's blue checkmark had a deceptive design. It also called out lack of transparency of its advertising repository, saying that the app fails to provide transparency around its ads, and that it doesn't give its public data to researchers overall. So let's take a listen exactly to what the EU had to say.
X has indeed breached its transparency obligation under the DSA. This includes X's blue checkmark. It deceives users. Anyone can pay to obtain the verified status, and X does not meaningfully verify who is behind it. It also includes X advertising repository, which does not work properly, and X...
And it's all bullshit because they all getting ready to bring censorship on another level, but they want to show you the struggle and divide over the topic, but I just typed in basically what's going on, what's the tension between America and the EU surrounding censorship, just to get to the point. The summary, The EU is restricting strict digital rules intended to make online platforms safer and more transparent. The U.S. views part of this as censorship directed at Americans and tech companies, calling these actions illegitimate and retaliatory. Elon Musk's X platform has been fined by the EU, and Musk's outspoken criticism has inflamed political opposition in the U.S., making him a central figure in this diplomatic and regulatory clash. This dispute reflects deeper philosophical and political differences about how to balance content, moderation, freedom of speech, and accountability on tech platforms. So that it's just more division between the beast and the whore, man. Okay? Let's finish a little bit of this one.
Think about that for a second, right? Denmark, whose national security has long relied on NATO and the United States, said that the US might actually be part of the problem. Now, don't get it twisted. This is a direct result of the Trump administration's aggressive foreign policy narrative, from trade sanctions to military buildup to threatening to annex Greenland. And now allies increasingly view the United States not just as disruptive, but unstable.
At least on paper, the U.S. and Denmark remain treaty allies. They're both members of NATO. But now you have Denmark looking to the U.S. as a potential threat. Can those two things be true at the same time? Or is the reality that that alliance doesn't truly exist anymore?
No, let's not take it that far. I mean, we have NATO, and we have not heard the Americans not wanting to be part of NATO or not wanting to honor the NATO oath. So let's not take it as far as saying that we...
And they are now, all right? Check this out.
The message is clear. Washington wants Europe to shoulder more of its own defence. A Reuters report says the Pentagon told European diplomats that nations have until 2027 to take over most of NATO's defence capabilities. That's everything from intelligence to missiles and troop deployments, roles the US has dominated for decades. If they don't, the US could decide to stop participating in some NATO defence coordination mechanisms. The Trump administration's pressure on NATO allies is nothing new. In March, Trump had already questioned whether he'd defend countries that don't spend enough.
Well, I've said that to them. I said, if you're not going to pay, we're not going to defend. I said that 7 years ago. And because of that, they paid hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, if you're not going to pay your bills, we're not going to defend you.
The Pentagon's...
So if America withdraws its presence from NATO, okay, that leaves these countries to pretty much fend for themselves, and they're going to make a coalition, Ezekiel 38th chapter. They're going to merge with Russia, all right, and eventually hate the whore, okay? This is good news to Putin, because what do you think Turkey's going to do? What do you think France is going to do?
Staff who set the deadline haven't laid out how the US would measure Europe's progress. But European officials say 2027 is unrealistic. Even the EU's own 2030 target for military self-reliance is seen as ambitious, and many key US capabilities can't be replaced quickly. Washington's relationship with NATO runs hot and cold. Back in June, Trump was applauding European leaders for backing a plan to raise defence spending to 5% of GDP. But in the months since, he's shown a willingness to negotiate with Russia over the war in Ukraine. And his Deputy Secretary of State told NATO foreign ministers this week it was obvious Europe should take primary responsibility for its own security.
All right, so we're living in interesting times because Europe, all right, with the threat of Russia, they eventually go lay down because they ain't gonna want a war with Russia, all right, without America's presence. So very interesting times going forward. And it's a lot, but the bottom line is that there's division, you know.
We don't have NATO anymore, and we're not allies. We are allies. We are in NATO together, and we have sworn an oath to fight for each other if that should be necessary. We already did it in Afghanistan when the United States invoked the NATO Article 5 as the only country in NATO's history. So we already went there and fought for the Americans, and the Americans definitely fought for us in the Second World War. So I think we owe each other some gratitude. I think we owe the Americans more gratitude than the other way around, and we understand that. We also understand the Americans are tired of paying too much money to protect Europe. That's fair enough. But it shouldn't develop into animosity and belittling each other and talking about how Europeans want to end freedom of speech and other things that are being said at the moment that simply are not true. We share the same values. We should be allies.
No, y'all don't share the same values. Y'all divided.
You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point.
A tipping point? Folks, that might be the understatement of the year, because while the media is obsessing over clickbait and manufactured outrage, NATO's worst nightmare is quietly becoming reality, and the technocratic control of the United States under Palantir and Peter Thiel and all of those guys is happening in real time. And yes, everything is changing right before our eyes. I'm going to show you exactly how this is unfolding. So over the past 48 hours, I received exclusive information from sources, information that has not been reported anywhere else. And here it is, that 2 Russian nuclear submarines have arrived off the coast of Venezuela, and more are on their way. This is in addition to the Russian battleships and cruisers, which have already headed to the region, and that has been reported. Let that sink in. These are not patrol ships. These are not advisors. These are nuclear submarines. And if you understand Russia's nuclear submarine fleet right now, this should set off alarms, because Russia's undersea nuclear capability is not just competitive with the United States, it's blowing us away. It surpasses us in several key areas: in size, in stealth, innovation. Their 2 new style submarines are the apex predators of the ocean right now, and we can't compete. And they're parked right now in our hemisphere. Why? Because something much bigger is happening behind the scenes, something Washington and Brussels don't want to talk about. They keep talking around it, but we're going to talk straight at it today. And here it is. Last week, President Trump quietly unveiled what insiders are now calling the Trump Doctrine. You could call it the Trump Corollary. It's a seismic rewriting of the U.S. grand strategy that effectively ends the unipolar order that America has dominated since 1945. The U.S. as the reserve currency, as the superpower, gone. Trump just declared it. Dare I say that this is a game changer? You probably didn't hear about it because the media totally ignored it, completely actually. But Europe heard it, China heard it, Russia definitely heard it, hence the submarines. And Trump told the truth, that NATO never once spoken out loud. There are now 3 great powers in the world: the United States, China, and Russia. That's it. Europe, according to Trump's own national security team, Europe will cease to be relevant within 20 years. Their entire civilization changed forever. This isn't me saying this. This is the Trump administration's official view, written down in a new doctrine. Trump's new strategy document essentially stunned the mainstream by bluntly stating that Europe faces a civilizational collapse, and it will be done, finished in 20 years. And of course, that means the death.
They don't got 20 years.
Of NATO, a fossil that no longer is relevant. Colonel Douglas McGregor reacted to this on our show earlier this week by saying bluntly that NATO is dead. Watch.
NATO is disintegrating. We're trying to maintain this facade that such an alliance actually existed as meaningful. But if you look at Berlin right now and Germany is like a volcano that is beginning to erupt.
This is the real world now. And Trump, unlike the neocons, is acknowledging it. So let's talk about Venezuela, because what you're being told is the sanitized version of what's happening there. You're told it's about narco-terrorism. That's a lie, of course, as we've debunked. So if you go one layer deeper, you probably think, oh, then it's about oil. But it's not even about that. You're told, oh, it's about Maduro. It's not about that either. Oh, it's about restoring democracy. Nope, it's not that. The real story that no insiders want to talk about is this. China is deeply entwined in Venezuela. China built the refineries. China built the infrastructure. They're building ports all through Latin America. China refines 30% of Venezuela's oil just off the coast in the Orinco Belt. So yes, it's about oil, but it's about China's influence in our hemisphere, full stop. And Trump's new doctrine is a blunt reassertion of the Monroe Doctrine. The Western Hemisphere belongs to us, not Beijing. And the moment Trump publicly rolled out this new strategy, guess who showed up? Russia sent nuclear submarines to Venezuela to say, hey, we're here too, and you don't get to box us out. Are we playing this game? And what sources are telling me right now is that these 3 superpowers are shifting everything. Trump's own documents now say China is not an enemy, they're an economic competitor. The new Trump doctrine says we're done being the cops of the world, essentially. It says Taiwan, yeah, it's important, but it's not important if other countries aren't going to pay their fair share to actually assist in the defense of Taiwan, like Europe. In other words, Trump is saying, we're going to start keeping our eyes on our own paper, and you'd better start doing the same, because we're not going to pay for it anymore. Now, the Trump doctrine isn't just anti-China. It also sidelines Moscow in a big way. It says America is no longer trying to run the entire planet, only its own hemisphere. Fortress America, essentially. And this is where the concerns about a technocratic rise in America come into play, right? It's for our security that we need to have all this biometric scanning and surveillance under Palantir. So we're going to see how that part unfolds. But if Trump can pull this off, it's going to piss off a lot of war hawks at NATO who want us to go to war with Russia, who want us to invade Venezuela, who want us to keep bombing Somalia and the Houthis in Yemen. This is a massive shift, the biggest since 1945. From a global policeman to a continental superstate. Can we pull it off? That means enormous opportunities here at home if this happens. You can already see it in construction and manufacturing. The demand for electrical engineers in this country is off the charts. Forget those like little bloggers that sit on a beach and write like travel blogs. No. What America needs now are real people that know how to do real jobs. Trump has essentially admitted something the political class never wanted to say out loud, that tariffs alone have not stopped China. The supply chain still sits in Asia, and our entire manufacturing base is hollowed out and gone. So now he's doing something much more radical. He's cutting off the hemisphere, a sealed economic and military wall, a fortified hemisphere, a return to pre-World War II strategic thinking, which we had in the United States, but on steroids. And this is why mass manufacturing is now being forced back into the United States. Rare earth mining is being nationalized, essentially. I mean, the U.S. is literally investing in precious metals, silver, copper, nickel. It's a vital national security interest, as Trump has declared it. Tariffs are being weaponized, of course, and Chinese influence is being ripped out of Latin America by force if necessary. Will they go quietly? Let's see how this plays out. Will Xi Jinping blink? Will Putin blink? This is not a policy tweak. This is a civilizational pivot right now. And the rest of the world is reacting. Europe is melting down. As Moon of Alabama put it bluntly, the new U.S. strategy strangles Europe, competes with China, and forgets the rest. And Europe knows it. They're done. Because if America withdraws its global NATO umbrella and China and Russia rise, which they are, then Europe essentially becomes irrelevant. And they know what's coming.
Not if they side with Russia and China, which they will, prophetically.
Demographic collapse, energy shortages you're seeing all over Germany, industrial decline, a dependent military, a migrant crisis that cannot be reversed. Europe is staring at extinction as a geopolitical actor, and Trump just said it out loud and put it in a policy paper. This is why we're seeing panic behind the scenes. And speaking of panic, here's something else that sources have told me. There are 11,000 Chinese engineers currently in the United States. What are they doing here? Engineers? Not.
All right, let's get the book of, you could look up that video. Redacted. Second Esdras 9:1 in the GNT. He answered, consider all these things very carefully. When you see that some of the signs I have told you have appeared, you will know that the time has come when the Most High God will bring judgment on the world he has created. There will be earthquakes, national rebellions, all right, internal intrigues, and all of the elites are behind all of this to bring about World War III, and they think they're going to rise as the phoenix from the ashes. All right, international intrigues, unstable leaders, and confused rulers. When you see these things happening, you will know, all right, that they are what the Most High God has spoken of since the beginning of creation. The beginning of the end of everything that happens in the world are clear. All right, so we're witnessing the beginning of the end, okay? And how the Heavenly Father has ordained it is division, all right, amongst Esau, Edom, power structure, okay? Germany's gonna renege. It's gonna get ugly, all right? And Lord willing, we stay firm. I just wanted to update on some of those things. Of course, a lot of these things we brought up today, you can go deeper into, but we was just giving you a surface level understanding that there's division amongst Esau, Edom, okay? And ultimately, this is a nation that is being destroyed from the inside out as they seek to point the finger at, you know, their subjects as the reason they're falling. All right, really, it's your greedy leaders, your greeters. All right, and your bloodthirst to just control everything, and you can never have enough. Okay, but hopefully I will edify. We'll be back with more, Lord willing. Shalom.